And I will say goodbye, and I will now delighted to introduce you to Philip Wrigley, our moderator. Philip is one of our Douglas County Democratic Committee people. Philip is a national board certified teacher of government, history, and English for speakers of other languages at Topeka High School, where he serves in various leadership roles. He was born and raised in Lawrence and is the proud product of Lawrence Public Schools. After graduating from KU, he returned to Lawrence High as the assistant swimming coach and to the whole district as a substitute teacher before earning his Master's of Education degree at Rockhurst University. At the state level, he currently serves as an elected member of the Kansas NEA Board of Directors and on the Kansas Professional Standards Board. Most importantly, he and his wife Paula are the adoring parents of two daughters, a 3-year-old preschooler and a 6-year-old first grader at one of our Lawrence elementary schools. So with that, I am pleased to turn this evening over to our moderator, Philip Wrigley, and to our candidates. Thank you so much, all.
Thanks, Pat. Good evening. As Pat said, my name is Philip Wrigley, he, him pronouns, and it is my privilege to be your moderator for tonight's forum. We have a field of 6 candidates who made it through the primary election in August. Of these 6, voters will be able to cast their vote for 3 or fewer. The 3 getting the most votes will be elected to 4-year terms on the Lawrence Public Schools Board of Education. The deadline to register to vote is October 12th, with advance in-person and mail-in voting beginning on October 13th. Election day itself will be on November 2nd, with polls open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. I hope everyone watching will be good examples for my U.S. government students who have heard from me again and again how important it is to vote. The rules for tonight's forum are as follows. Candidate introductions will be incorporated into the first question. I have prepared 6 questions related to the duties of a school board, with 3 spare questions if the candidates are feeling brief and we are significantly under an hour. I don't know that I'll use them. Each candidate will have up to 90 seconds to answer. A timekeeper will flash a yellow sign when 15 seconds remain and a red sign to let candidates know the time has expired. We will rotate who starts with each question, and I will prompt each candidate by name. After the final question, each candidate will have 45 seconds for concluding remarks. With a field of such outstanding candidates, I hope our forum this evening will help each shine in their way and help voters make an informed decision when casting their ballots. If everyone is ready, let's begin. First question. Ideally, a governing board draws on the various talents and experiences of its members to make the best decisions. What is your name? What is motivating you to run for a spot on the Lawrence Public Schools Board of Education? And what values, talents, and experiences would you uniquely bring to the board? Let's begin with Kelly.
Good evening. First, thank you to the Democrats for hosting us this evening and for Philip for moderating. We appreciate it. My name is Kelly Jones, and I am currently running for re-election for the school board. I am motivated to run for a number of reasons, but primarily what brought me to the table in 2017 was my work in social services. I have about 25 years in social service work where I have primarily focused in crisis work. One of the things I see and one of the benefits of public education and participating in this role, in a governance role, is that I see it as being part of the solution for some of the challenges that I've helped people overcome in their lives in my professional roles. So I've worked in schools and in prisons and in hospitals and hospices and all places that you can imagine a social worker being, including schools. And it is in that setting where I saw the most hope, and that's what brings me to the table, is to serve our community in that way. The values that I bring to the table also are really about relationship building. What motivates me most is serving our young folks in the community and making sure that we're doing best by them. And I'm glad to be here this evening with an extraordinary group of candidates.
Thanks, Kelly. Next, let's hear from Nate.
Thank you. My name is Nate Marshes. I'm running for school board because I believe in the next generation of leaders, our children. With the past year and a half of necessary social isolation, disruption to routine, and uncertainty about the future, we find ourselves in the midst of a mental health crisis. As a registered nurse who has worked the front lines in the emergency department and ICU through the pandemic, the worst thing I've seen is not how COVID destroys lives, though it is horrifying. No, the worst thing I've seen is that people are losing hope. Our mental health population at the hospital has quadrupled since February, and I've seen far too many children and teens who have suicidal thoughts or who have actually attempted suicide. In order for our students to reach their full potential, we have to address the mental well-being of both teachers and students and care for them so that the next generation can take our community, nation, and the entire world to prosperity and peace. In the meantime, I can offer the district good leadership and upstanding character. I'm also a business owner. I own RPG on Mass Street, and I've successfully restructured our budget in order to pay our employees no less than $15 an hour, while providing a positive, engaging work environment and a vision for community development which unifies us all. I have done this through the worst global crisis our generation has ever seen, and I want to offer my skills in entrepreneurial thinking and budget management to the district so we can pay our teachers and staff better and balance our budget. I have actually accomplished it in my business through grit, integrity, and resourcefulness, and this is what I will give to the school district as well. In this regard, I am in this group of fine candidates uniquely suited to serve on the Board of Education.
Thank you, Nate. Next up, Andrew.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Philip. My name is Andrew Nussbaum. My pronouns are he, him, and I am a teacher. I've been a longtime public school teacher in this school district for over 11 years. I've been a therapeutic special education teacher and case manager in this school district, and I'm also and have been a restorative justice practitioner. 7 of my years were at Free State High School, with so many that exist in this community that are now staff members, that now have families, or their next generation going through our schools. And the last 4 years as the therapeutic special education teacher at the secondary therapeutic classroom, a space and place that's so displaced and so marginalized in our school district that even members of the board didn't necessarily know that it has existed for over 20 years. We've got to amplify and honor the wisdom on the margins. I believe in relationship-based growth and deep systems work with a critical focus on equity and justice-based policies and building power alongside certified and classified staff, students, and families. I'm running because for far too long, our district leadership has cared more about PR than people, compliance than community, and how the district looked compared to how students and staff have actually felt. Equity has not been happening in our district, let alone justice. I'm running because I believe that Black Lives Matter and BIPOC and queer and trans students and staff must matter in our school. I'm running because we need to hold our district leadership accountable, and we need to speak truth to power, and I'm ready to work alongside you to do that. Thank you. Andrew Nussbaum.
Thank you, Andrew. Up next, Elizabeth.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Stevens. I am a native Lawrencian. I am a parent and a someone who has gone through Lawrence Public Schools. I believe in the power of the lived experience, and I believe in the value that it brings to governing structures. I think that as one of the values that I really hold on to is the need in advocating and prioritizing our kids living in the margins, not just our kids, but our families too. I believe that advocating and prioritizing those families is critical to the well-being of our district as a whole. Doing this means creating an environment that facilitates teachers and classified staff being able to connect and implement proactive interventions mindfully. None of which can be done if our staff aren't able to meet their core needs. I also believe in elevating the value of technical education. Technical education is something that we have to change the narrative about. We have a phenomenal program here in Lawrence, and we have a phenomenal four-year university as well. Those are equal. And I hope to really help work to change the narrative about the value of technical education and adult education as well. I'm grateful to be here and grateful to be speaking with all of you tonight.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Up next is Kay.
All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Kay Emerson. My pronouns is she, her. Super excited to be here tonight. So thank you for having us once more. I do a lot of different things. I'm an education advocate, I'm a community volunteer, but I am really motivated by the community. You know, we have a great need in our school district, but we also have collective resources. We are very affluent here in Lawrence, and I think that we can do something with that, not just through words, but through our actions as a community. You know, we have the potential to really ensure that every student reaches their definition of success, and that every employee that we have in our district feels valued and feel supported, right? But I really believe that in order to do that, that you, I, and everyone else must agree that, you know, what our priorities are. You know, our students, our staff, and the next generations, our students are the priority. So then we kind of get to, okay, that's great, Kay, but why you, right? And so I'm bringing my expertise in grants management, negotiation, and policy, and being able to really kind of help be resourceful with my experience in complex budgets, requirements, and I know how and not how to make use of your tax dollars. And so I'm bringing that to the table today. Thank you.
Thank you, Kay. Last but not least, GR.
Hello, good evening. My name is Gio Gordon-Ross, and along with Kelly Jones, I'm running for re-election to the Lawrence School Board. I ran for the board 6 years ago and again 4 years ago because I believe in public education. I believe in the foundation that it gave me, and I've witnessed the foundation that the Lawrence school system has given my children. I value that foundation and have worked over the last 4 years to help create systems to make sure that every student at every level can have that same foundation. I have a talent for listening more than speaking, for valuing input from those most affected by our decisions, and for absorbing what's happening around me and making level-headed, rational decisions that attempt to balance the needs of all the stakeholders the district needs to serve. I would bring with me 4 years of experience in understanding the district, understanding school finance, and what it takes to be a board member, and again, experience of how to balance the various priorities of all those stakeholders that bring those priorities before the board, staff, students, families, and the community. Again, I'm excited to be here. Thank you, Lawrence Democrats, for hosting. My name is Gr. Gordon-Ross.
Thank you, GR. Our second question is going to be about budgets, the most fun part of being a member of a school board. What are your priorities when developing a budget for the district? And we'll start with Nate.
Thank you. I think that one of the most important things that we can do as we move forward is pay our teachers and staff better. We've got to figure out a way. We've got to put our heads together and develop the budget in a way that we're able to accomplish that. So, you know, we have a huge task ahead of us. We are facing difficulty now with the bonds ending and a whole lot of things culminating together right now, the decline of our reserves. It's going to be extremely important to have the long game in mind. So short term, you know, there will just have to be cuts. There will have to be, but in the long run, what we have to do is increase our enrollment to thereby increase our funding. And there are plenty of ways we can do that. Some of the ways that I've been discussing with people in the district, you know, one of which is the LVS. We can recruit students from all over the state, and that brings us a certain number of dollars per head, and it can be used to pad our budget in different ways. Adding the grade, the pre-K grade and early education is another way we can just bring in more students. So there are all kinds of creative things that we can do to put the budget together in a way so we can pay our teachers better and balance the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Nate. Andrew.
My priorities. And first I want to say that I'm critical about what I care about, right? And I am deeply affirming about what is working. And I'm so excited within budget, within this frame of school board, of imagining what can be and must be. So my priorities are a redistribution of resources away from the top, such as the ballooning of six-figure salaries of district admin and middle management, and redistributing that money to certified staff and especially classified staff as we fight and we must work towards a living wage for all staff members. Prioritizing actual people in our district, telling the truth about what our history is in this space, place, district, city, and state. The NAACP right now is leading a journey to acknowledge what our actual history is here in Lawrence, Kansas. That's an opportunity to go deeper in learning and deeper in our education systems, advocating alongside special education students, staff, and families, and reimagining in terms of the budget, what safety and belonging can look like. How do we budget and prioritize a budget so that our marginalized communities can feel belonging, well-being, a deeper engagement with restorative justice and transformative justice practice, and working away from punitive and policing. Remembering that our staff's working conditions are our students' learning conditions. That would be, again, every day. What does that look like in terms of budget? I'm not sure, but that would be my focus every day.
Thank you, Andrew. Elizabeth.
So I'm going to echo a lot of what Andrew just said. I'm really in the same mindset. You know, we have within our community and our service structures, we see this trickle down kind of method in how we pay the folks who are connecting with some of our most vulnerable populations. We see people who are connecting with vulnerable folks on a day-to-day basis being paid to live within a poverty level themselves. So frequently you see folks, accessing services alongside those they serve. That's a huge flaw in our system. I think that we as a school district, we can do better. We can set the tone for how we pay our folks, how we show our employees who work with our most vulnerable kids that we value them. So as Andrew mentioned, restructuring, taking a good hard look at how we're currently paying our staff. What does that currently look like? How can we do better? How can we change that? Also understanding that these are people that we're talking about, right? So we talk about numbers and heads and statistics. We're talking about children and families, and how the decisions we make, the budgetary decisions that we make, how they affect our marginalized populations. That's the main thing that we have to consider and we have to prioritize. How are the decisions we're making about money affecting those who are most vulnerable in our communities?
Thank you, Elizabeth. Kay.
All right. So this is one that I've been thinking about for quite some time, even before the election, before I filed. So when it comes to taking a good look, what does that mean? I think about like being able to understand what is in our line items when we say general funds, and we have in our spreadsheets, like what does that mean? What does that equate to? I think about being able to have access to materials or access to what we have negotiated in our contracts, so it's easier for our community to get engaged in the process, and it's easier to understand when we are talking about what we are prioritizing or funding for. I think that's a huge part of developing that budget, because at the core of this, I really believe that in the power of community voices to set the priorities that our schools are going to align to, and how we look at prioritizing and developing out our budget. But when it comes to like right now, what are some things that are pretty important? I definitely believe that responding to COVID-19 and how we're going to look at recovering from that. Of course, compensation for our staff, and our educators, so we can not only recruit but retain, so they have the resources that they need. And then I think about that as social emotional investment when it comes to just having additional social workers to address the mental health needs of our students. So that's what I'll say right now. I have a lot more on this topic, but that's all I got.
Thanks.
Thank you, Kay. GR.
You know, we've talked throughout the campaign and even before the campaign about the current budget situation, and I think the budget priority for the current board currently is staff salaries and fixing our strategic reserve. When we charged for this current year, the budget and program evaluation committee, those are the two things that we asked them to focus on. That committee is made up of admin, it's made up of classified staff, it's made up of certified staff, it's made up of people that are going to directly be impacted by whatever decisions we were made that are going to be made. And at the time that we made that charge, we specifically gave them some things to think about. Specifically, we told them that in years past, we've always given them that charge, but there were certain things that were off the table. Things like, don't look at salaries, don't look at boundaries, don't look at this, don't look at that. And we specifically said that you have to look at it through a lens of nothing is off the table, because we have so many things we have to fix. We have to look at it all. We have to look at salaries. We have to look at boundaries. We have to look at class size. We have to look at everything to see what we can fix. And we specifically said that we need to look at it in $3 chunks. We have to look at, for every $3 you find, $2 needs to go to the salary and $1 needs to go to the strategic reserve, so that we can find a balance in the issues that we're trying to solve.
Thank you, GR. Kelly.
So I serve on the Program Analysis and Budget Committee and have for the last 3.5 years. One of the things we helped navigate this year was a $1.8 million cut, and we found that our reserves were something around $850,000. Just to give you a comparison, when I started in advocacy for public education in Kansas and in Lawrence about 20 years ago, our reserves were something closer to between $6 and $8 million in the years that I was here. So that's a pretty extraordinary dip. So when we look at what are our priorities, certainly one of our budgetary priorities is fiscal health. And why does that matter? You want to, when you're making a governance decision about budgeting, because you're not the manager of those dollars, you are making broad stroked, what are our priority sweeps? And I think for me, one of my priorities is making sure every dollar we spend impacts the most amount of children as possible, and that you're applying an equity lens when you do that. So that means that we're not necessarily distributing funds equally across buildings, but we're looking to see where is the most need. And also, when we think about how do we most impact children, we have to have qualified staff with us. So that does mean that we're looking at retention, and part of retention is certainly compensation. And getting to those numbers in the current budgetary crisis that we're in right now does require a participatory process, which GR and Kay mentioned. That means we need to ask stakeholders, how are the decisions we're making? What are the benefits, and then what are the unintended consequences of those decisions that we're making?
Thank you, Kelly. Our third question. What steps would you take as a board member to ensure that Lawrence Public Schools is competitive in recruiting, retaining, and recognizing outstanding staff in all job positions? And what would you do to ensure that staff reflects the diversity of the students they lead? We will start with Andrew.
Great question, and always a really hard question. Those 3 R's, right? Recruiting, retaining, recognizing. As a longtime educator in this district, alongside so many staff members, alongside so many classified staff members, a couple of patterns and themes that I've heard is, don't give me a pizza party, actually ensure I have a living wage, right? I have a lot of classified staff that are so brilliant in the work they've done, and yet find barriers financially, infrastructurally, administratively, to go from being classified staff to certified staff, let alone fulfilling our classified staff mandate to ensure that people have meaningful and appropriate educational experiences. Lawrence, Kansas is a predominantly white place, right? So we got to acknowledge that, name that, and then how do we recruit? How do we retain? How do we recognize? We will continue to have a staff, a certified staff, that is predominantly white for a while. We need to recruit more non-white staff members, educators in all levels, especially as teachers. And as we're on that long journey, we also need to ensure that even if our staffing isn't specifically reflective of the diversity of our students, because that is the case of so many communities like Lawrence, Kansas, across the country, we need to make sure that at least we are responsive and that all of our staffing has training and equity. All of our staffing is okay with saying that Black Lives Matter in school. All of our staffing believes in queer and non-binary students' rights and so much more. So as we work towards recruiting diverse staffing, we also need to make sure that we're responsive in the staffing that we have.
Thank you. Up next, we have Elizabeth.
Thank you. So I think that, I think that we need to look at our current hiring practices, look what they're currently at, and work to ensure that they're, we're truly non-biased. And then if we're talking about creating diversity and recruiting diverse group of educators, I think that we have to, there's resources that we have available to us. Are we collaborating with, places like KU? Are we with their diversity? Are we collaborating with outside entities that could help us diversify our staff? Also, I think it's really important when you're talking about diversity and you're talking about bringing in more educators and classified staff of color, you have to be really aware of the invisible labor that teachers and educators of color deal with on a day-to-day basis, and understand the toll that it takes on folks, and implement supports for people that are appropriate so that we can retain teachers of color and paras of color as well. So those are obligations that we have to be mindful of when we're moving forward and we're working to bring in a more diverse educators. There's a ton more that I could go into about that, but I think that if we don't have the correct supports in place, we're doing a disservice to not only our educators, but we're also doing a disservice to our students.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Kay.
All right. So on this question, one of the things I was thinking about was just like, going back to that ideal of being valued and being heard, and then just the fact of like being able to have time to meet your basic needs, like go to the bathroom, eat your lunch, just to start off with. And then I think about, when I talk to educators, like, it'd be really great if I just had time to learn the system before we are off and learning the new thing, and I think some of those things go a long way of being able to build trust, being supported, being that value. And then we could go from there. We have a lot of other things we need to focus on, but that's a huge part of what we could just start doing tomorrow, right? And then I think about, okay, so how do we work towards retention, or not retention, but diversity? As Andrew said, we do have a predominantly white culture, and that is Kansas. We have a predominantly white teachers, and that's fine. We can be able to spend time and develop that out, but there are things that we can do. We can be teaching in our curriculum. There are just people like Gwendolyn Brooks from Topeka, Kansas. It'd be great to know about her, or Polly Murray. If you don't know who that is, definitely be looking into that. But we could be building out our curriculum so our students at the end of the day, if we can't have someone that looks like them, being able to see themselves in curriculum. And then lastly, I would say just being able to support our programs like a NAS. So thank you.
Thank you, Kay. GR.
This goes a lot to the previous question of the budget priorities for salaries. It goes to the last 3.5 years spending time on negotiations with LEA, and then in this last year negotiations with PAL CWA. Where just this last week we were able to TA a contract of working with those two unions on this collaboratively of how we can retain these employees. We heard a report recently from our HR department that they've started to reach out to different colleges. There's a college, I believe in Tennessee, which historically has graduated the most historically the most teachers of color that we've built a relationship with. They've started to go to the Southwest, to the University of Arizona to reach Hispanic teachers, and then also outside of our relationship with KU, to also recognize that we have another university in this town as well, and to continue to build upon the relationships that we have with Haskell and the students there to bring in those resources, but most of all to make sure that staff feels validated because they feel listened to, that they don't feel ignored and they don't feel marginalized, that they feel like they're heard when they bring concerns. That's probably the single most important thing.
Thank you, GR. Kelly.
I think in listening to people's responses, one of the things I'm hearing is making sure that we are acknowledging how challenging it is to be an educator in this environment right now that we're currently in historically. And so retention takes on a whole new meaning in the context of what teachers have been through in the last 18 to 20 months. And certainly that's true for all of our other staff as well, classified and otherwise our administrators. So I think really other folks have mentioned it, but I'll say that one of the most impactful tools that a board has to influence recruitment efforts is, to the extent possible, to increase compensation. So minimally in the case of our district, it's key to create competitive wages with neighboring districts. So we want to closely follow neighboring salary alignment, prioritize for both recruitment and retention purposes, but also in creating welcoming, joy-filled school environments for our teachers. Compensation isn't the only thing that does it. So we have to turn to research and ask ourselves what makes a meaningful professional development opportunity for teachers, what are realistic performance expectations, ensuring bargaining and due process rights within our negotiation team. Certainly my time on the negotiations teams has been among the most valuable time I have spent making sure that we have teacher-driven curriculum innovation and implementation. It's providing the opportunity for upward mobility. Everyone wants that within their career, and then developing teacher, staff, and principal mentoring programs. Those things go a long way for all teachers, but certainly they go a long way to recruiting teachers of color as well. And I really believe we need to do a better job and a stronger job at creating our own and growing our own teachers of color here right from Lawrence.
Thank you, Kelly. Last but not least, Nate.
Thank you. It's money is just a given. Higher wages, higher salary, that's a given. So assume that in everything else I'm going to say. But with every industry, there are different things that the workers, the employees, the laborers need in order to feel valued by the organization. And in healthcare, as a nurse, I know that obviously we need the high wages, but we also need good patient to nurse ratios. In the front industry, in my business, my employees want flexibility as well as just general respect, because in the restaurant industry, it's far too often that employees just don't receive respect as human beings. And as far as the school district, I just really appreciated what Andrew said, just hearing his perspective about what is important to the teachers and going into recruiting, retaining, recognizing without knowing what people like Andrew have to say about what the staff needs. We're just going to be shooting in the dark. We may think we know, but we don't know unless we've actually listened. And so it's just so important to hear what the staff says. And then in terms of diversity, same thing. We have to listen to the experts. We have to listen to the people who are leading the charge. And as a Filipino American, diversity is extremely important to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Nate. Our fourth question. This past year, school boards around the country have had the burden of making decisions about COVID-19 safety protocols. From your perspective, what have been the greatest successes and the greatest struggles in USD497's adaptations to the COVID-19 pandemic? What values would guide your decision-making about safety policies during this pandemic? We will start with Elizabeth.
Thank you. So I think that, you know, what the pandemic has taught us a lot, right? So one of the things that I think that we've seen our teachers really adapt and adapt quickly. We saw our community come together to provide resources for our students and for our teachers and for our entire community as a whole. Those are some really, it showed us that we can change, we can think outside the box. The education doesn't have to look the same for everyone. We saw some kids really thrive in an online virtual school atmosphere. And that showed us that we can kind of maybe question some things. Maybe we can do things a little bit differently. It doesn't always have to be the same cookie cutter method. The barriers that we saw a lot of barriers though. We saw the disparities highlighted, the disparities that our students living in the margins face. We saw those made exponentially harder. We saw issues with childcare, internet access. We saw issues with accessibility to other resources within our community. Mental health was an issue. We saw a lot of things come to light that were already there, but we saw them much clearer. So my guiding principles are always going to be to advocate for the kids who are living in the margins.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
And
Kay.
science.
Okay.
Okay, so one of the things I think about the successes is, as Elizabeth was saying, you know, already there was how we were able to kind of get out of our way as a community to meet the students' needs. That was huge. It was remarkable. You know, we saw an issue. We worked collectively, collaboratively with one another to try to figure it out as best we can. You know, it was a crisis, but we still came together as Elizabeth was saying, and that's huge, you know? And so when I think about those values, I'm always going to be someone that is going to follow the data, but I'm also going to be the person that thinks about, if I was a parent showing up to school and I found out right then, that I had to turn around and take my kid back home and, I don't know, possibly lose my job, what difference would it made if I would have known sooner? So I think communication is huge, and that's always going to be kind of one of the things that I'm really focused on, is how we communicating to who our decisions affect. And that's all I would say right now about it. Thanks.
Thank you, Kay. Gordon, GR.
I think to echo Elizabeth and Kay, I think the biggest success that we had was to find out that one size education doesn't fit all. We found out that a lot of people thrived in a lot of different ways, and that is something that I think we can take from, and we can learn, and we can apply that going forward. I think the two biggest struggles that we had was that we unfortunately found that out on the backs of teachers, because we didn't have a good way to learn that, and we forced teachers to teach to all those different ways at the same time, to teach in person, to teach hybrid, and to teach online all at the same time. And you can't do that all at the same time. And so teachers had to struggle to do different modalities at once, and that was unfortunate, and it wasn't fair. And as Kay said, our communication wasn't always great. In fact, sometimes it downright sucked. And those were probably the two biggest things that we struggled with the most. In terms of the guiding principles for safety policies, you know, I work in healthcare. I value the opinion of healthcare professionals because I live and I work with them every day. And I think my guiding principles for COVID safety protocols will always be based on the advice presented to me by the leading healthcare professionals, first and foremost in our community, and then working up from there. So Douglas County, and then the state, and then the federal will be what I base my decisions upon.
Thank you, GR. Kelly.
So I'm going to start with the last part of the question first. And the last question was, what values would guide your decision-making about safety policies during the pandemic? So I'm married to a chemist. He is, so like Elizabeth, I believe in science, and it does absolutely root my decision-making. And in my household, we, like GR, are guided by principles put forward by health authorities and people who understand not just the data and information in front of them related to the disease itself, but who also have a deep, rich understanding of public health policy. So those are two things that you have to look at when you're in a decision-making role during a pandemic and you find yourself board president, which I would say was a masterclass in learning leadership under crisis. So certainly when we talk now about the struggles, so working back up from that question, the struggles that I saw that were most pronounced was a inability on the part of everyone to react fast enough. So we had this data in front of us, but we needed to make decisions really quickly and in a way that was uniformed and connected all the dots. And sometimes, and certainly in the very beginning of decision making, that was not always easy to do. And the result of that was sometimes that our students suffered, and certainly our teachers and educators did, as they were asked to perform and change directives on a dime. So I absolutely believe that we have learned how we make decisions and do we do it better. So that's one of the things that I think is most important, is like ensuring that both those communication components go out, but other pieces as well. And successes, our community fed many hungry people. And additionally, we started a new early childhood education collaborative. There are lots of ways we can partner together. And that was one of my greatest successes as I went through this process.
Thank you, Kelly. Nate.
I believe that the single greatest success so far has been that we have made it this far. It demonstrates as a community, our resilience, our grit, our ability to get through very difficult things. And it says a lot about us as a community. With the struggles, most everybody has said a lot of the biggest ones. I mean, we had problems with equity. We had problems with people feeling, like they were unheard. We treated teachers unfairly. There were communication problems. There were a lot of struggles. But moving forward, I really think that the values that would guide my decision making about safety policies during this pandemic, one of the primary things is flexibility. At the hospital, we were literally changing policies, like from week to week. Things would be changed. We'd have to do this, and now we're using this, and now this medicine is proving not to be as effective as this medicine. In the school district, flexibility is just so important, and you can't make huge policy changes really quickly, but it does have to be one of our guiding principles, is flexibility, willingness to understand the changing nature of science, that we learn more information, we learn things about treatments, we learn all these things, and we base decisions off of what we know now.
Thank you, Nate. Last but not least, Andrew.
Thank you, Philip. So many of you are already saying what I would trend towards saying in terms of safety policy, specifically towards relative to COVID and the pandemic. However, what I want to make sure I bring up here, and it is one of my roles if I was to make it on the school board, is to continue to ask, what do we mean by the question? What do we mean by safety, and for who, right? Because the reality is, before COVID hit, our schools were not that safe of places for a lot of people. During COVID, and now as we even continue to face COVID, our spaces and places aren't that safe for so many of our populations, staff-wise, student-wise, and family-wise, right? It's been a concern for me that there's been such an emphasis about safety, 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 safety over the past 18 months, and yet we've got pretty narrow in what safety means. Safety also means belonging. Safety also means well-being. Safety also means police-free schools. Safety also means special education students are receiving meaningful and appropriate services. Safety also means certified classified staff are getting those wages, right? So the reality is COVID hit, but all it did was, like Elizabeth said, amplify and even make a more acute the structural racism, sexism, and so much more oppressive elements that our school district was already nested in, right? So we got to keep looking at safety and expanding who we're talking about and what we're talking about. And yeah, I believe in masks. I'm all about the vaccination. And we got to expand more deeply what we mean by safety. That will be a value that I have going forward, because the reality is teachers can't do it anymore. Staff can't do it anymore. More of them are saying this year has been much harder than the last 2 years.
Thank you, Andrew. Our fifth question. Because setting curriculum, the official guidance about what students should know and be able to do upon graduation, is one of the major responsibilities of a school board, it is important for voters to know your criteria when faced with curricular decisions. Recent heated rhetoric about what history should be taught and how it should be taught has left teachers walking on eggshells even when teaching district-adopted curriculum. What do you see as the role of schools in helping students become civically engaged and in addressing sensitive issues in our current divisive climate? We'll begin with Kay.
Hooray! I'm super excited. I love this question. I wholeheartedly believe that our students should be civically engaged, even at a very young age. Being able to talk about issues is part of what makes us community. Is part of what brings us together to be able to not only experience, but be able to articulate how we had experienced that situation. So I am also thinking about how, as a school, our responsibility is to set it as a priority. It is a priority in our schools to be teaching students to be civically engaged. And then it's our goal as a school to be able to guide what that means. There's a lot more I can go and say about this, but that would be the role. And I just think about, for example, Dr. Johnson, she is building out the Student Equity Council, which is amazing. We haven't had that at Lawrence High and at Free State. And Dr. Lewis being able to bring in students in the decision making and being advisors, like bringing students into the fold and being able to experience what it is to be civically engaged besides just voting, which is important, and do vote starting next Wednesday. I will say that. But being civically engaged is just part of being an American. And I think that in order to know how to do that, we have to practice this, and it starts in our schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Kay. GR.
Yeah, I think Kay hit it right on the head. I think we have a duty, not to be cliche or lame, but we have a civic duty to teach our students to be civically engaged. I think there's plenty of opportunities, even down to the fact that a lot of our elementary schools serve as polling places, and I think that right there is a wonderful opportunity to teach even elementary school children what it means to be civically engaged and what's happening and what's going on. I think as we tackle some of those sensitive issues and current issues, I think it's important to acknowledge their difficulty and acknowledge why they're difficult to discuss at the same time that you're discussing them. You don't discuss and say, well, we don't talk about that, go home and ask your parents. We discuss them about in the context of their history and why they're difficult and why they're uncomfortable, but we still discuss them, and we still help kids get engaged. We help kids get engaged with organizations in the community that they can be a part of to expand their civic engagement. As Kay said, we provide opportunities for kids who want to go beyond that. And I think that really is one of our core principles and responsibilities.
Thank you, GR. Kelly.
So I'll talk about this in terms of the initial part of the question and just give some context. So there was legislative movement to legislate how we teach civics in our state and in our schools. We were seeing legislators wade into what is typically been local authority, and that was really challenging to watch. It is also the case that as board president, some of the most racist emails I received were related to critical race theory and the way that they positioned and talked about institutional racism, and they being individuals who are critiquing that particular theory and theoretical framework. So for me, when I think about what is our role as a board member, we instituted an equity policy that we developed together as a community. Myself and GR and Kay were part of that process, and there might be others here that were as well, to make sure that our community had the opportunity to recognize ourselves in our policy. We made a priority to have this equity policy. So I do think that any curricular decisions that we make need to be led with that, but they also need to be led with the thinking that who really is in charge of making and advising the board on curricular decisions are people like Philip and Andrew, who have expertise in education and are teachers and understand the core of what their content is. And that's certainly the case for civics. So in my address to the graduating class of 2021, I emphasized voting, which I think is incredibly important. And certainly I think our district could do a really good job of registering more 17-year-olds.
Thank you, Kelly. Nate.
Well, like Kay, I believe civic engagement is very broad. It's bigger than just voting. It really is involvement in the community, being a good neighbor, doing good works, caring for the widow and the orphan, so to speak. Really, that means caring for people who are marginalized. This is what civic engagement is, and it's a character trait. It's what we instill into children. It's not just something that we teach. Civic engagement is not just something that you do, every other year or whatever at the voting booths. When it comes to critical race theory, the way history is taught, there just is no way to do it correctly without telling the whole truth. We have to be very honest about the mistakes we've made as a nation in the past. We've got to be able to talk about the atrocities that we've committed as a result of racism and the structures that still exist today, which continue to encourage racism. That being said, we also have to do it in a way that when we're dealing with kids, teenagers, we're not telling people, listen, you are a bad guy and you are a good guy. We've got to do it in a way which makes everybody able to be successful in the future.
Thank you, Nate. Andrew.
Thank you. I always love questions like these. Our district has a hashtag, all students, one team, right? As a history teacher, as a social justice educator in this district, I think it's important to acknowledge that the content in our curriculum is one way of engaging with our students. But the reality is we are political in everything we do all the time. And that is interpreted, that is received, that impacts our students, our family, and our community. How many students we have in our classroom, that's a political decision. What we get paid, that's political. If we have classified staff having a living wage, that's political. What are we demonstrating we prioritize and value to our students and families, right? Also, I believe in Black Lives Matter. I'm also very aware, as a white person, aware that the backlash and the white lash of critical race theory is a reaction, a response, a historical pattern response to the movement for Black lives over the last 7-8 years in the United States, right? If we really believe in all students, one team, then we've got to prioritize the actual identities of our students more than harmful or oppressive ideas or ideologies of certain pockets in our community.
Thank you, Andrew. Elizabeth.
Thank you. So I think that, in order to, first off, we have to, when we teach history, we have to teach all sides of history, and we have to be honest about it. I think that's easy. To me, it seems like a no-brainer, right? That's an obligation that we have. When working to engage students or encourage, civic engagement, I think we need to first understand the hesitancy and the historic relevance of that hesitancy. Why are students of color not typically going to engage? What does that look like? And we have to be honest and be willing to get uncomfortable and have conversations about that hesitancy, and if we're working to change any of that. The other piece of that is how are we engaging our first generation American students? There was a comment about it's American to vote. Absolutely. How do we engage our first gen kids? So, our Latino folks, are we reaching out to our, first generation Latino voters? Are we doing that? What does that look like? How can we do a better job at doing that? And teaching folks that their voices matter. We're doing a great job. I have a child who is on the, and I just completely lost the name, but she's working on the Equity Council at Free State. Super proud mom moment. But those kinds of things are phenomenal. Those are ways for kids to get engaged and to see students of color step out and to get involved. That's one of the first steps.
Thank you, Elizabeth. With our final question of the forum, we're almost there. Let's look forward. My young daughters are at the start of their long journey as learners in Lawrence Public Schools. They are starting those journeys at a time when, due to the pandemic, the Kansans Can School Redesign Initiative, changing technology, and other factors, there really is no stable status quo in education. We are in a moment of uncertainty, stresses, and possibility, and Board of Education members will be an important part of charting the new course for public schools, the public schools that are foundational to our democracy. With that in mind, please tell us about your vision for how Lawrence Public Schools will be different for students a decade from now. We'll begin with GR.
It's a great question. Right before the pandemic and then during the pandemic, I think one of the most exciting things that we got presented to us was the Free State redesign. And I know that for a lot of Free State parents, they didn't get the same information that we got, and it was a little rocky when it rolled out in terms of the understanding and how it went. But I think there's a lot of potential there. One of the reasons there's a lot of potential there is because it gives a lot of control to individual students to take back control of their own education. And I think for me, how Lawrence will be different 10 years from now is it will be student-centered in having more of a say in their individual educational path. And at the same time, moving forward with some of the things that we want to do now, that we'll be able to provide better support and better services to our staff, classified and certified, as we start that process now. But specifically, I believe that we are on a path to develop a way for individual students to find individual goals and individual dreams that they have, that the district will be able to provide specifically for them as they move through the system.
Thank you, GR. Kelly.
In the next 10 years, where I believe that Lawrence District will be at, if we are able to focus our energy on the strategic plan developed by Dr. Lewis and community members, if we can really realize that, that would mean that we see an end to disparity in educational outcomes for students of color and for students with other marginalized identities. It would mean that we truly have a school building where social emotional well-being is valued as much as academic outcomes and successes. And it would mean, as GR pointed out, that individuals have the ability to leave our schools and be successful as adults in whatever arena they opt to engage in. But I think it also means that they have skills necessary to immediately enter our workforce, even if they're going to be extending into higher education and into university settings. That's my hope for our district, and where I believe the board must be focused on is those primary equitable outcomes. And when we are focused on inclusion and belonging, I do believe that every child benefits. So those things you do to further that goal will in fact impact every member of our community.
Thank you, Kelly. Nate.
You know, the technology has just changed society. It's changed the marketplace. It's changed everything about our daily lives, and we're just continuing to learn more and create more. And for the students, we have to be prepared to bring them into that world. They already know more about, you know, iPhones than I do and whatever, but there are things that we can do to equip them for the marketplace, things that we have to do. As Kelly said, they need to be ready to get a job immediately if they're not going on to further education, higher education, I should say. And you know, with the programs that we have and the ways that we can approach it in an equitable manner, we can utilize early targeted recruitment into technical programs, so the students are able to the minority students are able to just see what's out there, see what their interests might be, where their skills might lie, what their goals might be, what they might become, so that when they are entering the marketplace, they're equipped, they're ready. We've got to put resources into things like the College and Career Center, into our technical programs, and we're going to have an incredible workforce and incredible people afterwards able to contribute to society.
Thank you, Nate. Andrew.
10 years is such a long time, and yet reflecting on all of our experiences, right? It goes so fast. So I'm trying to think about like the time of that, the expansive question in that, but then also each day is an actual experience for everybody that's a stakeholder in this community. So I'm just wanting to honor that 10 years many times is too late for so many people. 10 years is hard to imagine for so many more people. And I'm still going to try to imagine alongside all of you, what do we mean by 10 years from now? I hope many elements of what I'm about to share are much quicker than 10 years, but I'm also aware of how community organizing and social justice and systems work, right? So I'm expecting a school district that can reimagine safety. I'm expecting a school district that has restorative justice practices as the foundation instead of punitive practices. I expect to have a school district that does not have police in our schools. I expect a school district that ensures there's a living wage for all staff members, and that a lot of the staff members representing inclusive practices and the diversity of our community are former graduates, right? Our teachers are our graduates, our classified staff are our graduates, our school board or our superintendent is a graduate, right? There's so many possibilities within our community going forward. I imagine that our school board is critical and expansive and imaginative and listens more closely to the unions that from the beginning were saying, here's some ideas, more adaptive and creative during the crisis that we were facing. So how do we adapt? How do we create? We've got to transform a school so there's more of a bottom-up power structure going forward, so that it's frontline workers, students, and families in the front, and then all of us are alongside.
Thank you, Andrew. Elizabeth.
Thanks. You know, I think that hopefully, you know, what we 10 years from now, I mean, and Andrew is completely right. When you think 10 years from now, especially when you're a student, feels like an eternity away. I hope that in 10 years that we have diversified our governing structures. We've diversified our governing structures and we've given voice to those who are typically unheard, right? So we have engaged people who don't fit the cookie cutter, right? Who have no affiliation with the university, although the university is fantastic and a great resource and wonderful asset to our community. We have a whole segment of our population who has no affiliation with said university. So I hope that in 10 years, we've diversified our governing structure enough that those folks have an equal voice in policy and decision-making and implementation. I hope that we have moved away from the one-size-fits-all education method, and that we have changed the narrative on the value of technical education. Technical education is higher education. Those jobs are valuable, and that education is also valuable. I hope that we have changed that narrative in 10 years, in 5 years, maybe even 3. I hope that we've implemented restorative practices, that we've eliminated the pipeline, the school to prison pipeline. I hope that we have bridged the gap in graduation for students of color. There's a lot of stuff that I hope that we've done in 10 years.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Last but not least, Kay.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. What I would say is I believe that, as a school system, I hope we lean into the status quo of uncertainty, lean into the possibility of what we can in fact build. Dr. Johnson, I referred to her before, but she talks a lot about the rebuild, rebound, and renew, and I get it, and so in addition to what everyone else was saying, I think it's important that we know where our history comes from and really kind of make sure that that's embedded into our curriculum. I think that's it's important to know not only where we're going, but where we came from. And so in addition to that, I just think about, our students being able to have access to the supports that they need to have the future that they want, as we've heard other people saying. But most importantly, I want to ensure that our students become not just recipients of our community, but active agents within it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kay. As promised, each candidate will now have 45 seconds for concluding remarks. We will end as we began with Kelly Jones.
Thank you for giving us this space to have this conversation. It has been a pleasure to run with these 5 people. So I appreciate evenings where we are together and discussing public education and prioritizing it within our community. As a person who served on the board, I trust Lorenzians to vote in a way that will allow our board to remain strong and to govern from a space that is equity-based and that really prioritize all of the great things and the visions that we've talked about this evening. I'm happy, as always, to have had the opportunity to do that thus far and hope to have another 4 years to do it. But I feel confident that Lawrence Public Schools will be just fine with whoever we end up with after the November vote.
Thank you, Kelly. Nate Marshes.
In Shakespeare's play Romeo and Juliet, 2 houses war against each other, the Capulets and the Montagues, causing violence and even political tumult in the city. At one point, a character, Tybalt of the House of Capulets, says, "What? Drawn and talk of peace? I hate the word as I hate hell, all Montagues in thee." In today's society, we find ourselves in a similar situation. Extreme conservatives and liberals war against each other and cry out against peace, hating the other house and hating one another. Communities are being torn apart. We have seen particular violence at school board meetings all around the country. I aim to unify the people of Lawrence under one defining principle, effectively raising up our future leaders, our children. If we continue down this path of disunity, our children will say of us, as another character in the Bard's epic drama, Mercutio, said, "A plague on both your houses. They have made worms meat of me, and may it never be."
Thank you, Nate. Andrew Nussbaum.
Thank you, Philip, and all of you. The Lawrence Times on Facebook wrote like a prompt welcoming all of us and hopefully many more to tonight's forum online. And in it, I put a little blurb. One of my closest friends, colleagues, and somebody that works in the school district right now wrote, "Andrew, why I'm voting for Andrew Nussbaum. He's been fighting alongside PAL CWA for a long time, and I know he would demand action on a living wage, equitable redistribution of resources, and so much more we must do to invest in our young people and our community." End quote. An amazing person writing that, stating that, and amplifying that. And then I wrote, "Who will you vote for and why?" So why are people voting? What are you voting for? And then I wrote, "Listen tonight." So I'm hoping those of you that were able to listen tonight, or those of you that are able to listen to this recording later, ask yourselves, why are you voting? How do we get the access to vote? Why are you voting? And who meets with your why?
Thank you, Andrew. Elizabeth Stevens.
Thank you. And thank you, all of you, for stepping into this space. I'm here, I'm running to give voice to those with lived experience. I'm here to help bring the value of the lived experience to a governing structure. I truly believe that our governing structures are only as good as they are diverse. The more diversity that we can provide, the better we're able to develop and implement policy that it elicits positive change. I hope to do that. As a board member, I look forward to serving continue to serve in our community. And as Kelly mentioned, we've got some really great folks here whose hearts are all in the right place.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Hey, Emerson.
Awesome. Okay. So I really believe that our district thrives when we work together as one community. You may have heard that our schools, they need help because they do. And our ability to provide quality education to, our youth is at stake. But here's the good news, okay? We're an amazing community here in Lawrence, and we have the potential to come together and actually create something really great. But the thing is, we can't do that alone. We need you, the community, to not only to listen tonight, but to stay engaged. And we need you to vote. We need you to vote starting next Wednesday, and to stay engaged. So that's what I'd say. And I look forward to talking to you guys more. Thank you.
Thank you, Kay. G.R. Gordon Ross, last but not least.
Echo a lot of what everybody said. Thanks for everybody. Thanks for doing this. It's not an easy slog, but I enjoy these conversations. I enjoy spending time with you guys. I decided to run for re-election because I think the current state of affairs, I think experience is what the district needs right now. It doesn't need more of the same. It needs experience to understand the systems, to understand school finance, to understand how all these things work, to make the changes that we've talked about tonight, to be able to hit the ground running and to be able to do what's necessary to be able to work through those changes that need to happen. And I believe that I have that experience. I believe I have the level-headed nature to listen to the stakeholders and to be able to do what's best for the district and our students. Thank you.
Thank you, GR. Thank you all, both the candidates and the attendees, for joining us this evening. The recording of this forum will be posted on the Douglas County Dems website, Facebook page, and YouTube channel. I want to earnestly wish each candidate good luck over the next few weeks. As their families are certainly aware, serving on a school board is a volunteer position, one that is as difficult now as it has ever been. Thank you so much for your willingness to give selfless service to the children of Lawrence, including my little girls, who were very patient and did not jump into frame. Pat, the floor is yours to bring us to a close.
Yes, I am glad to bring us to a close tonight. A lot for all of us to think about. I want to thank both our moderator and our candidates for tremendously thoughtful discussion. Thank you ever so much. And now I'm going to address the audience as I say goodnight. And the one thing I would say is that I'm counting on the people that were watching tonight. Those are the voters. We know you're going to vote. We hope this helps you make up your mind. But the other piece is that we don't always do so good in the off year, what are called the off year elections. And that's such a bad title for, especially in the time that we're in now. These are critically important elections. So I want to challenge my audience of voters. Think about who in your family or a neighbor or a friend or a half a dozen of those people. Once the video becomes available, you could send it to them and remind them of when they can vote. A lot of us have good, strong opinions about things, but we don't always get out. This is an election that we really need people to get out. So audience, you've got a job to do now too. And candidates, keep doing what you're doing. It really helps. Thank you. Good night to all.